Hello, my name's Harry Braun, and as an independent presidential candidate, I wanted to comment initially on the shoot-to-kill policies that we have in our police departments, given this latest cold-blooded murder that has just taken place, which is apparent to everyone that there's been so many of these that I have seen, and so many times now. I can't tell you how upset I am by this. It's just cold-blooded murder of innocent people by police officers who their first tactic is to pull their gun out and shoot somebody to death. These police officers should be charged with murder. That's what it is. It's cold-blooded murder, and that is not the objective of the police department. They are not supposed to be the trial, the judge, and the executioner. They are supposed to get the people to a point to where they can have a trial. And none of these people that I've seen that have been murdered by police officers over the past year were even committing a crime. One guy was selling cigarettes, for heaven's sakes. And this guy was just selling CDs. These are people just trying to make a living. And this is how the police treat them. This is a sickness all through our country and all through our police departments that needs to end. And here's how you end it. You end the shoot-to-kill policy, period. If a police officer shoots someone and murders them, it's murder, and they have to prove otherwise. They're not in the streets to be executioners. In fact, this whole concept of how we've militarized the police is part of the problem. And it's definitely compounded by the fact that our drug laws, and I'm specifically talking about all the drugs here now, are, first off, they're unconstitutional. If you're going to get, when we had alcohol made illegal, you had to get a constitutional amendment as per Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which gives the government no power to tell people what to take or consume in terms of products. No power whatsoever. That's why alcohol required to make that illegal required a constitutional amendment. No such amendment has ever been passed on these drug wars that have now been going on since the 1930s, that have spent over $1 trillion making, in this case, cannabis illegal, which is, according to the scientific world, and since I represent that scientific world, if you bother to read what's been published in scientific journals like Scientific American, cannabis is not a drug at all. It is in fact a 500 million year old neurotransmitter that's in the brains, all through the brains and gastrointestinal tracts of every human being and every other animal that has a brain and a nervous system. To make that substance illegal, people think had something to do with drugs. It had nothing to do with drugs. It had everything to do with oil and plastics, because Henry Ford was making a hydrogen and turned that into an ethanol fuel from his farm crops of cannabis that was half the price of gasoline, much cleaner burning, much safer all around. And Henry Ford was going to put the oil industrial people out of business. And so they had to make cannabis illegal, and that's what they did with their lobbyists in 1937, with no recorded vote in either the House or the Senate. And this is a big part of, the police officers are also on commission because of these drug laws. If they find any drugs on anybody of any kind, they can then, under the forfeiture laws, they can seize any cash or any values that they find, whether there's been a crime committed or not. They can seize the car. They have all sorts of seizure capabilities. So the police are operating on commission, which is another really disgusting thing to do. It's bad enough our doctors and dentists operate on commission. Now we get the police officers too. This is fundamentally what's wrong with how our country operates, and why we need a revolution, all right, but we need one with a clear and concise step forward with clear solutions. And ending the shoot-to-kill policy is one of those solutions. Police officers should never be shooting to kill, unless they're obviously in a shootout. If they've got somebody and you can clearly know that they do, and first off, they should all have cameras on, given these circumstances. But in any time a police officer shoots someone, you should immediately open an investigation for murder, because that's what it is, and it should be ended. I'm sick of seeing it. I'm sure most Americans are. Now, I also want to talk about the fact that this FBI decision under James Comey was just shocking. He should hire me, since I've done some considerable research on Hillary Clinton as a presidential candidate. And since I'm trying to put the oil industrial complex out of business, also, that's the whole point of my presidential campaign. I'm with Henry Ford on that. And most people don't realize Henry Ford was involved in doing this, where essentially you have the farmers grow everything on their farms like they used to, including all the medicines. It was the oil industrial people, like the Rockefellers, who set up the pharmaceutical drug business, where they found they could make 1,000 times more profit from a barrel of oil if they're making aspirin than making gasoline. That's what all this is about. And that whole pharmaceutical drug industry, you want to talk about what's toxic drugs? Those are the toxic drugs, all of them. And I can prove that to you from a judicial ruling by a senior administrative court judge from the DEA. His name was Francis Young, and his ruling was in 1988 after weeks of testimony from experts from the industry. And they found that all of the pharmaceutical drugs were toxic, and the only thing that was not toxic at all was cannabis. And that's what's illegal. And that's part of what's bizarre too. That's a blatant violation of the Constitution, and it's a blatant violation of science in terms of what's known. Cannabis has been used as a medicinal herb for 10,000 years. It was at the heart of our civilization. And it was, we've been on a cannabis economy in the United States right up until it was made illegal in 1937 by the oil industrial complex. And that needs to change immediately. Of course, it can't, because the oil industrial complex controls both political parties and everybody in the Congress with their bribes. So that's the big part of the problem. And let me see here. I don't know what this came up for, but in any case, I am running for president, and I'm going to try to underscore the fact that the Black Lives Matter issue is profoundly serious, and we need to take action now. We need to stop this murder in the streets by our police officers. Period. We need to stop it. This is just another example. Shooting somebody dead when they're running away from you. That's bizarre that we tolerate such things. We need to end the use of lethal force. We need to end the use of these ridiculous grand juries. Grand juries were invented by kings to come up with their own little juries so they always get the verdicts they want. And that's why they're done in secret. That's not justice in America. There's nothing that we should never tolerate such type of phony judicial proceedings. Therefore, the obvious solutions are to end the drug and cannabis wars, even the serious drug issues. I mean, we should be basing what we're going to, in terms of our laws, should be based on whether what you're producing is toxic or not. If it's not toxic, it shouldn't be illegal. Plants like cannabis are not toxic. They're highly nutritious. They should never be made illegal. And the reason, you talk about aspirin and profitability. Another hugely profitable enterprise was plastics. And Henry Ford was making all of his cars, all of the cars themselves, the fenders, the hoods. He replaced all the steel with plastics from the cannabis seeds that were 10 times stronger than steel. And you can see these cars on YouTube if you just look them up. Henry Ford's cannabis cars. He was beating it with an axe, a big axe, as hard as he could on the rear deck. And so were other engineers, and you can see, watch the axe just bounces off. Imagine if you hit your car with an axe. Anyway, these are the very straightforward solutions, and the problem is people like Hillary Clinton have been underscoring the major part of the problem between her and her husband, who ignored those judicial findings from Judge Francis Young, and actually ratcheted up the penalties and mass incarceration of millions of innocent people. Otherwise, because these cannabis laws are absurd. And that comes from the editors of Scientific American. That was the consensus, especially if you understand anything about the scientific nature of the subject we are talking about. Hillary Clinton has been on the other side because she has represented the oil industrial complex and the wealthy people all of her professional life. And the fact that James Comey's ruling came out like it did was shocking to me. I mean, I don't know this man, but I know him now. And I know how he apparently, he needs to hire me, because he had 150, 170 investigators, and he missed all the racketeering charges of the Clinton Foundation completely. Didn't he read the emails, what they were doing? about the emails about fracking. Let me tell you, Hillary Clinton's always got a teleprompter. And in fact, we should make teleprompters illegal for candidates because they mask everything that they say. Teleprompters, she's got a staff of close to 1,000 people and who writes all this, and all she has to get up there to do is read, like the news readers do, the corporate news readers just read the news. Everywhere she goes, she's surrounded with teleprompters and who tell her everything to say. And what kind of people, this doesn't instill confidence that these people are actually knowledgeable about anything, including President Obama, who he's an articulate guy, but I'm very much opposed to his policies and have been, and when I tried to run against him in 2012, the Democratic Party wouldn't even allow me to appear on the Democratic websites. They don't want to play fair, they want to play mean, and they do. Donald Trump is an interesting guy with a teleprompter. Personally, I like it better when he doesn't have one, because then you can see the real person and hear what kind of a mind this guy has, who insults and mocks crippled people on camera. I mean, it's really quite extraordinary that I don't know how anybody gets past that, personally. But now they're trying to get him to just read the teleprompter. Please don't get off and just read the message, please. And that's just exactly why I hate teleprompters. Because you don't ever hear the real person. You hear that only this very carefully crafted person. And the real person, and I love to hear Donald Trump speak just right from the gut, because he says exactly the kind of person he is. And I find him to be incredibly disgusting. I can't tell you how much I am revolted by this guy who's not just a con man, but a really disgusting one when you look into all of his financial dealings and how he conducts his affairs and the people he screws over in terms of the working people who he doesn't pay for. He's been involved in thousands of lawsuits. Thousands of lawsuits. Who's ever heard of such a thing? I don't know anybody this wacky as Donald Trump. And when you look into all the things that he's destroyed, that he's got involved in, he has a track record of failure. I realize he was born wealthy because of his father, but he lost most of that money. He was so deep in debt, he was actually having to hit up his kids, his children, for loans. He was that far out of money, and 3 times they wouldn't give it to him because he couldn't offer any collateral. His own children. This is a guy who is a giant con man, but he wants to mass murder people for oil too, in the Middle East and elsewhere. So he's the kind of person I'm trying to get rid of. Except we have another billionaire, Hillary, the press has not really reported this on the electronic news media, except if you read the Washington Post, you would know. And I don't know, I guess the FBI director doesn't read the Washington Post, but they published in 2015 that the Clinton Foundation received nearly $2 billion from a vast global network that includes corporate titans, political donors, foreign governments, all of which is illegal, especially if you're Secretary of State, and other wealthy interests. Before Hillary resigned as Secretary of State, which is now being investigated, under racketeering statutes, supposedly, but I guess I was wrong. They didn't even look at that. They were just looking at emails. The details of, well, she clearly violated all those policies too. I mean, even Comey said how she had all kinds of servers they were trying to delete all the time. Made it very difficult for him to do his investigation. And he says there's no intent? Why would any government official be going, only criminals do that. Only criminals destroy evidence that was subpoenaed by the Congress, but Comey didn't consider that felony worth prosecuting. Really? Golly. So I guess the Clintons do have a separate group of laws for them, for their corruption. And when you talk about her private affairs, you probably don't realize that Hillary Clinton, in the entire time she was working as Secretary of State, she was also working for the Clinton Foundation. When they were raising these billions of dollars from these corporate donors, including the uranium companies from a corporation in Russia that Hillary negotiated along with her husband Bill, while she was Secretary of State, 20% of the uranium reserves were sent to this corporation. They now own it in our country. And this is outrageous. This is treason against the American people and should be stopped immediately. Treason because uranium, like oil, as a scientist, I can tell you the only safe place for those substances is locked in the Earth's crust. You should never let anybody mine them. The minute you do, all of the poisons are then released to the atmosphere forever. And in the case of uranium, it has a half, so the key isotopes I'm concerned about, uranium-238, which is the primary isotope that's involved in this, the whole industry, has a half-life of 4.5 billion years. Nobody can control this stuff. It goes around the world in the wind and the rain, and it's on the tips of all of the bombs that we're dropping. That's one way they get rid of it. They blow it up. Except when you blow it up in the atmosphere, it goes worldwide in the winds and the rain, and now it comes back and it's falling on us. That's how smart our government is. And the Obama and Clinton administrations are just part of this gigantic mess, which is why we need fundamentally to change course. So, the U.S. State Department also reported that she lied repeatedly to the American people on national news. She lied. And I guess that means nothing to the FBI guy, Comey. And the fact that she clearly violated all the State Department rules for emails, and only criminally intended people would do that. But when you find out what she was doing, clearly she never asked for permission. She lied about that too. And when the record officials in the Records Division raised concerns in 2010, she had their superior instruct the staff to never speak of the Secretary's personal email system again. Woo! Well, what do you think she was doing? Hillary told the AP last September, what I did was allowed. It was allowed by the State Department, and the State Department has confirmed that. And she lied about that. Blatant lies. She's running for Commander-in-Chief of the United States, and she's blatantly lying to the American people. Okay, what's she lying about? You really want to know what's in those emails? You should read them. And fortunately, because we have them now, we know what she was doing. But it had nothing to do, first of all, it was clearly an intent, had nothing to do with convenience. In fact, we now know from the FBI director that she had all kinds of servers and computers, devices, all over the place. She didn't have just one. That was another lie. This was all intended to basically block the Freedom of Information Act people from finding out what she was really doing. She likes to say she's transparent. She's a liar. She isn't transparent at all. She went to great efforts not to be transparent. When she deleted those emails, when she says work-related, well, she wasn't calling the Clinton Foundation work-related. That was just the secretary, when she was saying, oh, well, my Secretary of State stuff, except she was simultaneously, and she even got permission from Obama to do this. She was simultaneously working for the Clinton Foundation while she was Secretary of State. And since there's billions of dollars being raised, where do you think your priorities would be if you're on that, if you're doing this type of activity? It's going to be on the money. Of course it is. Everything she did was for the money. But what was she doing? That's the really important story that the news media hasn't talked about at all. And my consensus is that the news media, from a corporate standpoint, is owned by the oil industrial complex. So what you see on the corporate news is what the oil companies want you to see. And Hillary is their candidate, and so is Donald Trump. That's why they gave him $2 billion of free media coverage. Free media coverage. You don't give that to anybody else. Hillary pays for hers, but she already got her billions. And it's all the business of politics. Well, how does it work? Well, here's how it works. She's been poisoning and mass murdering people for oil corporations. That's how it works. That's what we do. That's our U.S. foreign policy. Oh, you didn't know that? From day one in the State Department, and here's an exceptionally good article that was done, how Hillary Clinton's State Department sold fracking to the world. Because fracking is the new oil industry mantra. Since they were running out of conventional oil, they found this new temporary stopgap bridge, they call it, except it poisons aquifers underground forever in the process. Poisons everything they touch. Oil's always been a nasty business. Fracking elevated to new levels of being nasty because now it's contaminating our aquifers forever. They'll never be cleaned up, not to the end of the earth. That's what she was doing from day one. And who was she representing? She was representing Exxon, Halliburton, and Chevron. That's who those are the people who've been financing her campaign since when she was even running for the Senate. And they were financing the Clinton administration before that. Because remember, the oil people also own the pharmaceutical drug business. And when that's Obamacare thing that Obama did and sold out the entire American people to the the pharmaceutical and oil corporations, yeah, they're all one now. It's the oil industrial complex. That's what we're dealing with. And she's part of this. And she talks about she didn't learn anything from Iraq, where she voted wrong on that one, where we destroyed the cradle of civilization for oil, because that's all it was about. But she did the same thing in Syria. She wanted to do a regime change there. She wanted to do, in fact, she did do a regime change in Libya. In fact, she has a famous quote. She came, she saw, and he died. He meaning Gaddafi, who was working with our government officials in a cooperative manner at the time. I don't know why she had him killed. And now, ever since she removed him, look what's happened in the chaos in Libya. It's total chaos there now. And Ukraine, the news media never told you the truth of why we were in Ukraine. All you had to do was look at the natural gas and fracking operations that well, first off, there was a rebellion in the Ukrainian government you probably forgot about. Where did that happen? Where did that come from? Suddenly a billionaire's in charge. And he starts a war right away with Russia, because he's going to turn all those gas lines that are Russia's economic lifeblood, he's going to carve them up and give them to Exxon, Chevron, and Halliburton. And many of the people in our Senate, including Senators McCain and Lindsey Graham, they were all pushing this. Yeah, cut the Russians off. Okay, the Russians reacted. They seized Crimea, which is where they had a major naval base for 400 years. That's the first thing they did. And then they put their army on the board, and they're ready to invade the entire country, which they could easily do, because this is like now a new Cold War that's been fired up. And it's all over oil and gas. This is what these people do. Except you're mass murdering thousands, millions of innocent people for oil and coal and minerals, for corporations that are multinational. They don't care anything about our country. They only care about money. And they are so rich they can bribe both political parties, and do easily. So essentially, Hillary lies when she says she's over there to help democracy in Libya. There's only one thing in Libya that anybody cares about, and it's oil. And she calls it democracy, and mass murdering people in the process. And I'm sick of all this mass murdering stuff that goes on, and we call it democracy. Here's what you get. Hillary came, she saw, and the people died. And this is what we leave them. We got 60 million people now have lost everything, and they're invading Europe because they're so desperate, and our country. Bill and Hillary's priorities involved supporting oil wars, fracking, Keystone projects, nuclear and uranium deals, keeping Glass-Steagall repealed, promoting massive student debt programs, outsourcing trade deals, the absurd corporate health care subsidies, the privatization of prisons while keeping cannabis and other natural toxic herbs illegal, while also promoting policies for the mass incarceration of millions of otherwise innocent Americans who were using such, quote, illegal plans. Hillary, fracking, and oil. That's what she's all about. And she hasn't mentioned that at all. She didn't mention that was her primary mission as Secretary of State, was to push fracking worldwide. And over the objections of the local people who said, please don't frack our land, please don't poison our land, and she rolled right over them. She had the power of the oil industrial complex behind her. And by the way, so is the entire United States military. That's who they serve, the oil industrial complex. That's why we're dropping all those bombs, for the oil industrial complex. Up in Kurdistan, that's the only well that we got, I should say we, that American corporations got, was up in Kurdistan. Exxon ended up with that, and their partners, Halliburton. And then ISIS came along and took that well, and geez, that's when we started rebombing Iraq again. Oh, you didn't hear that on the news, did you? And the toxic uranium we've talked about. She was cooking a deal with Putin to basically give 1/5 of all the uranium in the United States to Russia, which transformed Russia from being a uranium deficient country that didn't have enough uranium for their own nuclear programs. Now Putin's a uranium superpower with our uranium, and like I say, that should be left in the ground. That's the worst thing you want to do, is mine uranium with a 4.5 billion year half-life. Yeah, what are we talking about? This is crazy. And we never needed uranium. We never needed oil. If you've been following my campaign, the first car built in 1807 was running on hydrogen made from water with electricity, not gasoline. It wouldn't be invented for another 100 years, basically. It wasn't really invented. It was a byproduct of the kerosene manufacturing business. But that was still like 100 years away before that would really get into the market. So all the early cars were running on hydrogen. Pollution-free, poison-free, carbon-free, no climate change. Completely renewable, never runs out. You make it from water. When you burn it in your car, you get the water back out of the exhaust. It's pure water vapor. Nope, they didn't do any of that because there's no money in it. It's all in the public domain since it's been used for 200 years. Can't make any money doing that. I'm just making the point. And you look on the back of my wall here with all the hydrogen production systems that Lockheed and other professors of engineering have been actively involved in for 200 years now. The stuff behind me could have been mass produced 200 years, or at least 100 years ago, because all of this happened in the 1800s with the hydrogen economy stuff. But now we're on this, and we're making our planet uninhabitable with these toxic poisons. But here's Hillary and Bill. They're on Lou Dobbs as they're talking about the Russian uranium deal after the donations were given to their foundation. Pure bribery. It should be highly illegal. This is supposed to be a charity, not doing uranium deals for money. I guess the FBI director didn't think that was important. In any case, both Bill and Hillary have committed high treason against the American people for their personal profit of their private foundation. And they're getting away with it. And Obama's not going to prosecute them because he wants to apparently do the very same thing. He wants to become a billionaire too. He's working hard at it. He spends most of his time at fundraisers. And dropping more bombs on people and keeping the wars going. He mass murders people every night with those drones on his personal authority. And it's like, what a government we got. What a government. And Hillary's going to follow in his footsteps. She's a mass murderer too. And of course she lies about it. She lies about everything. She lies as much as Trump lies. You've got two pathological liars. One who I know is a billionaire, Hillary, and hers money's all cash. Trump hasn't got anywhere near that kind of cash. And there's enormous cash that's flowed through the Clinton Foundation that Comey just didn't notice from all those emails. And there was even a lot of it where the money was transferred through Canadian banks to avoid any kind of disclosure to the government, any kind of disclosure to the IRS. All of that's a felony. What's Comey doing? I thought he was the head of the FBI. She gets off away from all this. And then you hear about the Clinton Foundation in Haiti. That was a disgusting thing where, first off, it's State Department money goes to the Clinton Foundation, and then the Bill Clinton takes over the whole operation and works deals with private corporations who put millions of dollars into their foundation. And screw the Haitians. That was all just a front for their backdoor deals. And this was on 60 Minutes, incidentally. And they interviewed the people there from Haiti who said how Bill Clinton came in, he and the head of the country made all the deals in private themselves. They couldn't say anything, and they were part of the council. This is what goes on. And it's disgusting. And they're getting away with it. All of these deals, the Clinton Foundation was involved in all of this with taxpayers' money, going to them ultimately. And a bunch of billionaires. And this one company that got the rare gold permit, which didn't actually have any mining experience, but would soon have Hillary Clinton's brother, Tony Rodham, on its board. Oh boy. It's just disgusting what goes on. So it's all about pay to play. That's illegal. What happened to how did Comey miss all that? And this is what's causing this is the oil age-induced 6th mass extinction event in the Earth's history. It's now almost over. We lost 8 critical years under the Obama administration, 8 critical years under the Bush administrations. They did nothing. The scientists have known about this since the 1960s and 70s, and so to have the Exxon engineers, they were actually working their business plans out, calculations that show the Arctic's soon going to melt. And they'll go get more oil, they think. They knew all about it. It was deliberate to destroy the planet, to make money. And they're still doing it. They get away with it. It's legal in our country because they set the laws. And let me just take you through what fracking is, in case you don't know. You're injecting millions of gallons of poison below the water there initially, except the casings that go up and down this pipeline, they all leak. Many of them leak in the first year. They'll all leak eventually. Because they just always do. You can't stop it. And when they leak, they'll diffuse everywhere and poison aquifers forever. That's what fracking is. A typical fracking well site only operates less than 2 years. And then the frackers leave, and then the people with that land, now their land is poisoned forever. Try to sell your land now. Can't drink your water, can't breathe your air, and look what they've done to the whole part of our country that they're going after, poisoning it for a very short-term resource that'll be gone soon. When we could have been making hydrogen from water with wind machines back in the 1800s. This is just more diagrams of how they destroy the earth, how they pump all these poisons way down, deep down in it. And as I mentioned, it lasts less than 2 years. Contaminate the drinking water. And there's tens of, these are some of the worst chemicals known, like diesel fuel that they're just injecting down in the earth. And what you get is you get it back up through your kitchen sinks. That's what it does to the water. You know, water in our country and on the planet is as critical as anything there is. There is no fresh water that's not contaminated anywhere in the United States right now because of the oil industrial complex. And fracking is now making it much, much worse. Here's a fracking pit. Take a look at what they're injecting when they're mixing all these poisons together before they inject them down deep into the ground. And then leave them when they're done. And much of this fracking is done on public lands. These are American people's lands they're poisoning forever because of their lobbyists. This should all be illegal. It is in Germany and other countries. They don't let people poison their lands. We do in the United States. And then even the sand. You may not know this, there's a global sand problem. The sand is running out. And fracking takes a lot of sand. And so does concrete production. When you say sand is running out, gee, every building built requires sand. And it's running out worldwide. And the Chinese are the big problem here now because they got 1 billion people and they're super efficient in their construction work. So efficient, in fact, that they consumed as much concrete in 2 years as our country consumed in the last century. How long do you think that's going to last? And sand mining is causing sand to disappear worldwide, and it's going to be it's a huge issue that nobody's talking about unless you're reading the scientific literature. And it's completely out of control. And it's incredibly toxic how this sand mining occurs. It's like fracking. Once you get done, the ecosystems are dead. You could never use that land again. Topsoil's all gone. Let me see, I've got some, the demand has continued to rise exponentially. And the damming of the rivers has held back the flow from the mountain interiors. Everything we do is destroying our ecosystems for corporations' profits. And then when you've lost everything, and this is, you can see the forest back here, and this is what they do to it. They scrape away all the topsoil. This dust that you see flowing around here is highly toxic. Highly toxic fracking sand particles are known to cause cancer and lung disease. And look at them blow away. And look at the explosion of this frack and sand mining just for fracking, which we don't need. We never needed it. You can make you can make hydrogen from water with electricity from wind machines, and you can mass produce enough wind machines in 1 year of production. You need about 3 million 2 megawatt units to do that, to displace all of oil, coal, and uranium in our country forever. And you could build 3 million wind turbines in 1 year, once the tooling's in place. Why are we doing this at all? Because the oil companies run everything. Over 3,000 acres of prime farmland in Illinois has been acquired for fracking and sand mining just in 2014. These people are not stopping. These mines are destroying rural communities along with the farmland. And you were talking about blasting hundreds of diesel trucks down these rural roads, dropping their sand along the way, stadium lighting so bright it blots out the night sky, 24-hour-a-day operations with roaring equipment and compressors. They go on within a few hundred feet of the homes and the farms. And so the farmers who can get out of there, and for those who are forced to stay, they're living in hell. And their land will never be the same. All for a temporary resource. Less than 2 years, and it's gone. But the damage goes on right up until, I suppose, the earth comes to an end. Silica is also a known human carcinogen, known to cause lung disease. Why is this even legal? Why do we allow this? This is what happens to the rural neighborhoods with the fracking trucks when they come in and they take over. These are carrying water, because you need enormous amounts of water. Water's running out everywhere, and here's the fracking trains. Oh yeah, we're not building liquid hydrogen trains that are completely non-toxic and pollution-free, and hydrogen trucks and all that. No, we're building oil, oil, oil. Everything's oil. Trillions of dollars being invested in more oil infrastructure. And look what happens to it. Look at this house over here. How'd you like to be living there when this takes place? And these are all highly toxic. This is as toxic as it gets. And it just daily happens all the time. This is not unusual. And as USA Today reports, the fracking boom is already running dry. Many wells are quickly losing productivity. And but the chemical poisons will be contaminating the air, water, and people for eons. This is crazy. This is criminal. This should stop immediately. It also causes earthquakes and supervolcanoes. What do you want? What am I talking about? Well, we now know that when you inject all that fluid under the water under high pressure, it causes faults to slip. Shouldn't take a brain surgeon to figure that out. Oklahoma saw dramatic rises where the average earthquakes, they used to have 2.5 earthquakes. They were lucky if they had those every year. Now they got that every day. And these earthquakes, you take your house apart, the foundation falls apart. People hear them coming, it's like thunder under the ground, and then their house starts shaking and falling apart. How would you like to deal with that? Just for a temporary resource that's going to soon be gone. But something else happens when you start faults shifting, and we're fracking all up and down the San Andreas Fault in California. Why is that a problem? Well, because there's a supervolcano sitting right up here in the north, right up near Fresno. Not just a normal volcano, a supervolcano that's way overdue for eruption. And it's right in these fault regions that are being fracked. There's a photograph of it. The trees here are dying because the magma coming up from the Earth's core is so close now. There's a caldera of magma below the surface here, and it's now rising, and it's killing, the heat is killing all the trees. And when this thing goes off, it makes Mount St. Helena. I'll show you a comparison chart here in just a second. But we even have a bigger supervolcano these are kind of connected, because when one goes off, it's very likely the other one's going to go off, because they're both way overdue. Millions in some cases. This Yellowstone Caldera is the largest on the planet. It's also way past due in terms of its eruption cycles. It could go off any day now, according to the scientists. And it's a scary thing, because our country is completely unprepared. We are not ready at all. And the Obama administration is well, I presume they're aware of it, but they don't tell the public, and we're doing nothing to get ready for this. Here's the scientists know all about it. You can see this is the caldera underneath the Yellowstone region. It's a monster. It goes right into the core of the Earth. It's the only one of its, this is the only supervolcano in the world that doesn't exist on a major fault line. It creates its own. It's that big. And the two supervolcanoes in this country, when they go off, if even one goes off, you can look at the size of some of the smaller volcanoes. Here's Mount St. Helens here. And here's a Yellowstone Caldera. And the one in Mammoth isn't quite as big, but they're both monsters. And you need to be ready for these things, or you're not going to survive what's going to come. Here's another example of just how deep, far down this thing goes right. This is the Yellowstone Caldera that goes right into the core of the Earth. And it's had many eruptions in the past. And here's some of them that you can take a look at, for example. You can see here on these various eruptions Here's Mount St. Helens up here. And this was its ash cloud. This is the ash cloud from one of the recent Yellowstone eruptions. You can see it comes all the way over to here. In some cases this is 100 feet thick, and this ash is so heavy it'll crush your house or buildings. So it's really nasty stuff. There's light ash too that goes high up into the atmosphere, and that's going to blot out the sun for a few years. Oh boy, what's that going to mean? Here's another just example of the time scales involved here. These are the eruption dates. As you can see here, and this one's 2.1, 1.3 million, and 640,000. That was the last one, and that's the one that's now overdue. And that means it's going to probably be a big one when it goes. And we're utterly unprepared for this right now. Utterly unprepared. And if you're unprepared, you're likely not going to make it. Why are we concerned? Well, because if you look at the magnetic pole shift, it's going exponential now. That's because of all the magma that's in motion under the Earth. And the geoscientists who study this thing have made comments that they haven't seen this much magma in motion in the Earth's core since the last time Yellowstone erupted. That causes a lot of people to be concerned. Take a look at how magnetic north is moving. It's galloping. This is causing all kinds of chaos in animals who have magnetic north in their brains for migrating, and you've got Arctic owls showing up in South Florida now because they don't know where they're going because everything's off now. The whole Earth is undergoing massive changes because of what's going on with, even we have a certain amount of iron in our brains and stuff. It's not, but we don't have the kind of migration patterns that animals do. And they're locked into this magnetic north, and when it gets off base, the animals are going where they don't belong, and they usually don't survive when they land there. That's another real red flag warning that, geez, this is really, could be imminent. And then I read from General Viktor Bondarev, who's the commander-in-chief of the Russian Air Force. Recently, this somehow got online that his memo said a catastrophic event may be nearing for the North America region. A severe magnetic anomaly detected by the Cosmos 2743 satellite on 3 June 2014 occurred at the Yellowstone region of the western United States, which resulted in what is called an earthquake swarm. This information was verified by the U.S. Geologic Survey, magnetic anomaly maps, and data for North America showing a strange magnetic disturbance ripple emanating from Brooks Range and ending at Yellowstone on 3 June. Within days of General Bondarev's June 13th warning, a number of significant earthquake swarms began occurring as a precursor to what could be the main catastrophic event, including in Alaska by a powerful 7.9 magnitude earthquake on 23 June. General Bondarev's report continued. He's the head of not only the Russian Air Force, but the Space Forces and satellites as well. The Obama regime, which is their term for our government, and its allies have an acute awareness regarding this potential cataclysmic event due to their sudden request to have the Chinese Navy warships participate in their annual Rim of the Pacific exercises. They were all put on high alert when these earthquakes were going off, but the American public was never told anything. When this does go off, that light ash is going to envelope the Earth, and we're not going to have growing seasons for many years. That's it, just one supervolcano goes off. If one triggers the other, which is likely, it could be longer. And I've talked in my campaign about how important indoor food production systems are, and we need to get these in every community with wartime speed. That's the only thing that will allow us to survive as a civilization, and perhaps as a species, is if we get these going. Because if you can eat, you can survive. If you can't, you're going to die. It's that simple. I've got the details of all of this on our braunforpresident.us website and what these indoor food production systems are going to look like. But fracking was never necessary, and it should be stopped immediately. And people like Hillary Clinton, I'll tell you what. And we don't have time to wait for another phony election between two billionaires who both support the oil industrial complex. And I say phony election because not only are the votes phony, because they're counted in secret by a private corporation that virtually no one knows the name of. Do you know the name of it? And do you know who's counting the votes? No, because they're counted in secret by people within this right-wing corporation. A couple of brothers who set it up. They count all the votes, and you believe it. You're gullible enough to believe, and I don't believe it. These are just phony elections. And then you look at how phony this whole election has been with this electoral college and the delegates and all of this, which is why my whole campaign is about is getting all of this replaced with a democracy amendment that I have proposed. It's on our website. It'll put the majority of citizens in charge of the federal government with a citizen ballot that can be downloaded from our website. It's a paper ballot once you download it, and then you mail it to your Secretary of State's office, and they can then validate your ballot, count it, scan it to a computer memory system, and then archive the original paper ballot. And that's how all of our elections should be taking place. And this one that's going to be downloaded for our ballot to change our country from being a republic to a democracy, that'll be the first time we use it. And then right after we pass that, ratify that amendment by a majority of citizens in 38 states, downloading it, filling it out, sending it to mailing it to their Secretary of State's office. You got to buy a stamp. And once it gets to the Secretary of State's office, when a majority of voters in 38 states send those ballots in, the amendment will be ratified. And that could happen in a couple of weeks once this gets on the national news. So far it hasn't made it there, but I'm working hard on it to make that happen. And I'll leave you with this thought about Hillary. One of the people who I very much admire as a national hero is medical professor John Goffman, he was a professor in medical physics because he was the chief medical officer for the Atomic Energy Commission for many years. And helped Oppenheimer in World War II when he was a graduate student at Berkeley, making the plutonium so that Oppenheimer could have enough to do an initial small explosion to measure yields. And they didn't have any plutonium. They had to go to Goffman and his fellow graduate students to get it. But Goffman made this comment, and I'm going to leave you with this, that only one thing that must be done about the widespread contamination of the American people from these chemical and radiological poisons. Only one word comes to his mind. And that word is Nuremberg. As in the Nuremberg Trials against humanity in World War II. Remember those? Yeah, those. And I'll remind you something else. Those Nuremberg Trials started with the judges. Who, in our case, we have judges that blatantly violate the U.S. Constitution every day. And put a lot of people in jail, and a lot of people get killed over it. These are really important issues that need to be brought to bear, and I can tell you we'll never solve the problem until we put the majority of people in charge of this government and get past all this nonsense that we have to put up with. That's the purpose of my campaign and my election, is to put the majority of people in charge. And before you can elect me, you got to do that first, the way this is all set up. In terms of the way I've set this up with this ballot and this election, you've got to put the majority in charge first, and then you can vote for me or whoever you want. But once you get control of once the majority is in control, you better know what you're doing. And I know precisely what we need to do, and I'm going to have a series of additional broadcasts to spell it out in great detail, because as a scientist I have to document and say, and I want you to understand everything I know so that you know it. I don't keep any secrets from you like Trump. You got to elect me first, and then I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. That's a classic con game. Classic con game. This is running for president. If you got something to say, let's hear it. And this is what I have to say. We don't have much time left to do anything. We have a mass extinction event going on that's being utterly ignored by our government and by the other two presidential candidates. I am the only person that intuitively not only understands it, but I've been working on these problems for most of my professional life. And I represent, unlike these other people, I represent thousands of scientists and engineers worldwide. They don't. And all of these engineers that I represent have been working for 200 years now to replace oil and coal and uranium, all of that, with hydrogen. How to produce it, how to use it as a chemical feedstock to make everything from gasoline, which is, you can't make gasoline without hydrogen, ethanol, peanut butter, or computer chips, or potato chips. Hydrogen's in all of it. And when we shift from an oil economy to a hydrogen economy, everything is going to change profoundly for the better. And hopefully we have enough time to get ready for the chaos that's coming from the series of torpedoes that are in the water between climate change, supervolcanic eruptions, and this overpopulation problem in the world that nobody talks about. But you're going to hear a lot about it from me, because this overpopulation program is a major element of this mass extinction event. And so we have to deal with that too. But there's only so much time to do all of this. I think you've probably heard enough for the moment. But there'll be more. And this is how my campaign is going to take place, is up close and personal. I don't have time for simple slogans or just driving all over the place and talk to small groups here, small groups there. I can't do that because my wife is very ill. And we just can't get out right now. But I can talk to you and respond to your questions if you send them to my website and or comments. The website's the key, our link between each other. And I want to hear your comments, and mostly I want you to help spread the word to get this message out that there is an alternative to these two corrupt billionaires that the majority of people clearly don't like, and for good reason. I can't stand either of them myself. And I'm saying that, remember, when you put the majority of people in charge, that's a universal mind of over 60 million people. That's far superior to any single person. That's what the mission of my campaign is. And that's why I need your help. So we can make this real. We can have a real judicial system in this country. And we need one. Without grand juries. Thanks for listening. And you'll be hearing about me often. Thank you.